Hey everybody, good afternoon. This is the Cosmic Dispatch. I'm your host, Corey Nakasue, and I'm here with Anastasia Wasco, my friend and my colleague, and we are going to talk about December, and we're going to talk a lot about Sagittarius, but not just about Sagittarius. We're going to talk a lot about Jupiter and Mercury and Gemini, because that Sagittarius Gemini axis is hot, like starting maybe a couple weeks ago up until the new year. There's a lot going on in that space. And I brought Anastasia on just not because I love Anastasia, not just because of that, but because, you know, you're such a like quintessential Sagittarian, and like if I didn't know your chart, like I would say, oh yeah, that's a Sagittarius type. There's a lot of Sagittarius stuff going on there. But after looking at your chart, I was like, oh my God. And oh my God, for the transits that we're having right now with Jupiter and Mercury, they're all over your chart. So we're going to talk a bit about that. But before we get into that, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm me. I'm Anastasia. That's my introduction. Um, now, I am a writer, editor, and psychospiritual guide. So my passion is languaging realities, some known, some unknown. And what I do is I write about that. Words are medicine, words are portals. I publish books related to expanding consciousness, expanding realities, and that is in a creative, expressive way or in an intellectual way. And I also walk with people in and out of those realities, trained as a counselor, bill myself as a psychospiritual guide because we are dual. We are humans having this psychological experience. We're also spirit having this psychological or having this spiritual experience on earth, spirit into matter. And I am available for individual consultations. And I also have a company called Planet Dust. Planet Dust publishes these works. And I also have something called the Self Mastery Program, which is a container. So if someone is going through major change, starting to walk the road of self-awareness, self-awakening, spiritual awakening, I have a 12-month program where you can meet with me and also in groups and learn about what's changing inside of you, and also really find your agency and create your reality in full awareness. And I am very interested in what is unknown, but also what's known, because it's really just remembering stuff, right? So a lot of my research and what I'm interested in are those higher dimensions, the superconscious, non-human intelligences, and how the human experience interfaces with writing, creative writing, and how our world itself is growing and emerging, how the universe is itself conscious and knowing itself through us. And stop there because I bet people are going, what? But yeah, that's me.
Well, I mean, that was just spoken like a true Sagittarian, right?
Right. I should have like an emblem and a flag flying outside my trailer, right? Like, here lies the ultra explorer, like Sadge Nation.
But it's not just a Sag thing, because you're Gemini rising, and so
Yeah.
the interplay between the two is also, just in listening to you into your introduction, about languaging and having that expand internal and external worlds through things like questioning, very mercurial, Jupiterian meaning making, deconstructing meaning, and then reconstructing, and we're going to talk a lot more about those types of things because those are like so ripe for talking about. But thank you for joining me. I'm so glad to have you here. Yeah, I think we
I'm so happy
started
to be here.
the first episode I did of 2024, I think, was with you. And so this is
With Aquarian themes.
it was
Yeah.
Aquarius. And so this is, if I do another one, I don't know if I'm going to make the cutoff for 2024. So this might be the end or the last one of 2024. So just, it's a nice bookend. And I really like talking to you about all of these kinds of things, Aquarian types of things and Sagittarius types of things. Because we have a lot going on in Aquarius as well,
Yeah.
on a different sort of timeline, which we'll talk about that. But
I have thoughts about timelines.
the multiple and intersecting timelines. And I loved what you said about when you kind of caught yourself, the unknown. Well, really, it's known, but wait, it's just remembering. We label a lot of these mysteries in life. It's like, oh, the great unknown, the great mysteries, the things we don't know about. When we actually do, that there is some remembrance somewhere. And sometimes when we think we're discovering something, it's not actually like a brand new discovery. It's a recollection or making a connection with something that is remembered by like a different part of us. Not everything is like purely like cognitive recall, as we are like conditioned to believe and conditioned to move through the world in this like linear way, that there were things that happened in the past and things move forward. And that's how time works, when like not quite. I think it's a lot wilder than that. We want to think of like, rewilding time. And because of the particular things that are going on between like mid-November to early January, with this Jupiter retrograde and Mercury retrograde, I think it's really, that's one of the many things that's going to be like right at the forefront. It's going to be pushed forward. People are going to think that they are possibly losing their minds. It's like, why are things so chaotic? And like really trying to like push things back into that linear timeline, just so they feel like they have a frame of reference. And I think life is going to be like, no, I'm going to pull it all apart. And we're going to have to experience maybe a lack of coherence for a while, which is a totally natural thing. Again, we'll get more into that. I'm going to do a little housekeeping here. If you like this content, please like and subscribe, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on any of the many platforms that host podcasts. We are there. I'm not very active on social media, but I do archive all the shows, and I do make announcements when I'm offering classes, workshops, or content, etc., like this. I also have a newsletter that comes out seasonally. There might be little extra newsletters. Again, if I'm doing something, I have a newsletter that will be coming out at the end of the year. And so the details for that will be in the show notes if you want to get on that. Because I honestly don't know how much longer I'm going to be on social media. We're going to be talking a lot about social media, news, communications, and I'm not sure what to do with social media yet, but I am archiving things there at least. I also write for Chronogram magazine. I do a monthly forecast with horoscopes, and I also have this series called Astrology 101, where I talk about some of the bigger events, the bigger astrological events that are happening in more depth and detail. And so all of that in the show notes. And I'm teaching a lot of movement class. I'm teaching some neurodivergent groups. And I also teach regular Zoom classes on my own platform. That will all be in the newsletter. I can also throw that into the show notes. But movement class, I find, has been really important during these times when there is like a relative breakdown in a singular narrative, and it's pulling people like way up into their headspace and actually disconnecting them from their bodies, adding to this sense of chaos. And I want to say sense of chaos because maybe things really are this chaotic. Maybe it's just our perception. Like, and the, and that's another like fragmenting thing. Everyone right now I find is having such a different experience of like quote unquote these times, just because there's a lot of change going on inside of people in relation to these bigger changes we're cycling through. And some people I find are doing quite well depending on how they're framing things. And sometimes that framework is really tight and strong, but not actually helpful or effective in dealing with the amount of change that's going on externally. And sometimes that framework is really helpful because if they didn't have that in place, I think they might spin out emotionally. But either way, I think it's important right now to really invest in anything natural and experiential with your body, especially if you are spinning out because of so much information and so much change. Like, go and touch a tree. Go and feel your body out in the world, even if it's cold, but feel things out in space. Make that connection with the world in some kind of embodied way. It'll kind of pull you back into some kind of present felt moment. And I think that that could be helpful. I also just wrapped up a container space that I started with a friend of mine, Shay in the Catskills, in September. We finished that up. It's called Getting Through It Together. And we were practicing divination in real time during the past eight to 10 weeks. So that covered eclipse season and election season. And I'm really grateful for that space. It was a wild space. And by wild, I don't mean like crazy, but it was wild in the sense that it was very raw. And the people who showed up and decided to undergo this experiment were really brilliant and brave and sensitive and lovely. But it was a wild space, and it gave me such a sense of how, again, how differently everyone is perceiving the present moment. We really cannot make assumptions about who people are right now based on any superficial like personality indicators. We can't assume that, oh, because I'm a woman of color, that I'm going to, think this way politically or think this way socially. And because that is a white man who is privileged, well, obviously he's going to be this way. And people are doing a lot of this compartmentalizing right now. This is, like identity politics. And that is not a good move right now. Because as I've been talking to people, like I've learned, I kind of knew this, but the more I talk to people in consultation and in that space, you you scratch even the surface and you will be surprised at how people came to, whatever conclusions they're coming to, how that belief system was built or developed. Like it's there is no um coherent narrative right now. And so people are having various reactions to that. And again, we're going to talk more about that as we dive into Gemini and Sagittarius. But one of the goals I have for doing these episodes is to bring people on who have their own unique embodied story and experience of what it's like to live with some of these archetypes. And Anastasia, you have your sun in Sagittarius, your Gemini rising, and you also have Mercury and Neptune in Sagittarius in like a little cluster. And all of that is being hit by this Mercury Jupiter opposition that we're going to be experiencing into January. So I was wondering if you could share some things about, first of all, just being a sun in Sagittarius in general. Like what are some of the archetypes that ring true for you, and maybe some other stories that you think are very Sagittarian that maybe people haven't even thought about?
It's delightful, but it's a choice. um, Having my son in Sadge, in a way, sets me up because of the conditioning in mainstream or conventional astrology and astrological media to be boisterous, sunny, the life of the party, this adventurer. But if I be with that, if I just, kind of lean into that, that's not necessarily true because there's a lot of darkness to being a Sag. For example, by always pushing boundaries and by so often going into spaces where it's like, all right, I'm going to make the best of this. Either I'm going to be the life of the party or I'm going to bounce. There's a lot of translation. When I was traveling regularly, I mean, just kind of I spent many years just kind of get up and go. And I was going into spaces where someone might not have encountered an American before, might not have encountered an American, a woman in a certain role. And there was a lot of translation where that I was going to be that person's impression going forward. Think about it, you send someone to the moon and an alien shows up, alien meets the person, and then the alien's going to be like, oh, all humans must be like this, right? Because this is their ambassador, this is who they are. So there is a fundamental power struggle there in getting to represent the narratives that I bring forward. And I love that you started off with the idea of a main narrative being fractured, of people having different experiences. And in leading up to this conversation, I was like, nah, I don't think the narratives are fractured at all, because I think we all have different levels of awareness and we're all going to experience things in our own way. So in being a Sagittarius, I kind of hold this embodied translator, ambassador, also trickster archetype. And there's the duality of Sagittarius, right? There's the Gemini in me, where I can decide how I'm going to put myself forward. I'm going to decide what information is going to come through. This sunny disposition comes with lows, right? There are times when I feel the weight of, that movement and exploration. For example, you're in the Hudson Valley. I'm currently in Joshua Tree. I'm going to go home to Alabama soon. But I left the Hudson Valley because suddenly everybody wanted to be there. And there were a few of us who had been there 10, maybe 15 years prior to the pandemic, because a lot of the movement up into the Hudson Valley happened during the pandemic, right? We'd all been there, and, Kingston specifically, roughed up town. But a few of us were like, hey, we love this. We can make it work. And then all of a sudden, it's like the telephone line. You tell someone else, you tell someone else, you tell someone else, and all of a sudden city money's coming up and changing the landscape of the town. So I know that some people felt responsible for that change, but I feel like that's a very Sagittarian story where it's like, hey, this was great. I made it work. And then all of a sudden, I tipped the domino, or we tipped the domino, and we can't stop that change. But that's also good. There's a lot of motion in this Sagittarian experience. There's a lot of creation in the Sagittarian experience. And life is that. The power is in the motion, and it is in the movement. And as a Sagittarian, I think I'd like to say, like, we go through a lot of phases of life, right? So because we're open, because we're curious, because we're always out there, or we can be out there in the world. I have been out there in the world. It starts from this really beautiful impulse of like, hey man, what's up? What's going on? Someone called me an extrovert recently, and I was like, really? All right, cool. Go with, because I'm just so in my nature. But then the dark side of the Sag is that information and how it gets changed or translated or not, and how then it gets received or not received by someone. And everyone has a choice. So while, especially now in this climate, I think it's a good example, the political climate, we have the choice to stand in our own agency, or we have the choice to kind of sink down into negativity and emotionality, depending on which side of the spectrum you land. And I think the very Sagittarian sort of flavor is, for what is my truth here, and what can I bring forth and shine with, knowing that it's true, and knowing that it doesn't have to be true for everyone else.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so one of the symbols of Sagittarius is the centaur. And so for people who might be listening or watching, they're still like kind of fuzzy on Sagittarius, or they're mainly getting a lot of like pop astrology types of delineations. Like you were saying, life of the party, the like the comedian, the buffoon, the clown, the loudmouth, the person who's just like super blunt. There's that. And even in, if you go through some of the old stories about the centaurs, like they were drunkards and rapists and carousers and partiers. And this speaks to like some of the symbols in that image of the centaur, which is half beast, half human, and how in Sagittarius there's a needing to somehow integrate the two. There is that like kind of lusty, philandering type of stuff that goes on in Sagittarius, wanting all the experiences and wanting to like feel through them and burn through them and then move on. And then there's also, you know, the figure of the human sitting on top of the horse's body, or the body of the beast, which represents this other story of Sagittarius of, you know, the sage, the wise one, the teacher. Um, and ideally, if you can get like some of the lusty embodied need for like physical experiences, and then turn that into some kind of wisdom that is then like disseminated. You know, Sagittarius is the last fire sign, and so it's about, you know, it's the like the wildfire. It goes out, it gets disseminated. um
Can I
that
jump in there?
is sort of like an ideal for the Sagittarian experience, and I'm wondering if you feel those two, the tension between those two types of stories.
1000%. Yeah. And I have a great story to that, because I also want to say that Sagittarius in a certain octave represents home. Again, the truth of what home is for you. So holding that thought, the last time that I was here having a chat with you, I was in Alabama, and through a ridiculous series of circumstances, because Alabama was never on the bingo card, I wound up living in Alabama in my tiny little 20-foot travel trailer on the river out in the middle of nowhere, right? And what I like about myself, the very Sagittarian aspect, is that when situations arise, I'm like, all right, well, I'm open. I'm gonna figure it out. What had happened was my trailer had wrecked just north of Birmingham, and people came and helped me out. And I was on my way back to New York from New Orleans, but then folks were just like, "Girl, you know you can live in that trailer, get a lot, $300 a month." And I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like I can live somewhere and I said, I'm game. I ain't going back to New York. I ain't paying, XYZ out the wazoo for stuff. I'm going to live in Alabama, and I work online. So cool. I was also going through some massive healing, some massive body healing. And that year and a half stationary in Alabama was like one nonstop Dukes of Hazzard episode. It was so delicious, right? I mean, down to the whole like, hey, you want to go swimming? Sure, jump in my truck because the door don't open. Jump through the passenger window of my truck. We'll ride up to the canyon. Like, hell yeah, I'm in. And I was surrounded by people there who didn't have the similar financial status, didn't have the similar intellectual or even job status, right? I mean, forget a career. Like, y'all are down there, making $20, $30 out an hour or a week, working somewhere cheap. But I was so happy. I was so happy, and it took me, and I went with it. I was like, this is true for me. I spend half my time in cutoffs and, like a muscle shirt, but this is true for me. What I love, again, working online. So I'm making my money. And I was for them this character. I mean, for me, they were the characters, but like my people were the characters. But I was like, we all characters around here, And I couldn't figure out for the longest time what the translation was. And then I realized at a certain point, and there were things that the area that I wound up in was very similar, very, very red, very, very blue collar, just like the town that I fled in New Jersey, where I grew up in New Jersey. I was like, never again. But my $1 million question my entire life was, if my family situation, my home hadn't been so unstable, if it hadn't been so crazy in New Jersey, would I have left? And I realized through my time in Alabama, number one, yes. because my higher calling was to do all of this, whatever it is that I do, make books, talk to people, help them feel good, find themselves across time and space, right? And I couldn't do that by sitting stationary. I had to put myself out into the world and follow this inner voice, this calling. And that gave me a lot of closure. But it also opened up the question of, but why am I not leaving? What's the draw here? And I was like, again, number one, I love this super gritty lifestyle when all electronics are off, out of office is on. I'm out somewhere, mudlarking in the ruins or like climbing up in the canyon. I'm gone. I'm like this feral little 8-year-old girl growing up in the woods like I was, reclaiming a lot of that younger self, that inner child that, when she's here with me now as a 43-year-old woman, professional woman who is healed on many levels, that inner child who hadn't been healed is also here. And I love her as her unhealed self. I love me as my healed. We're cool. We're together. But I didn't know this going into Alabama. And I didn't know having this lifestyle that was eerily similar to, in a community that was eerily similar to one that I had fled. I didn't know that the narrative could flip, right? And putting it through a lot of reflection and integration, I was like, you know what? This is that hidden rewilding archetype coming through for embodiment. Because how many people just get to say, bug off, I'm gonna go down here and like find me in a couple days if you can find me. And again, I have this professional career, my business is global, but I unplug, you can't find me. And I love that. And growing up as someone who had a lot more responsibility, was thrown into a lot more situations that A, could have traumatized people for life, and B, people don't recover from, I was like, nah, I get to be free. Bills are paid. I got my neighbors making me ice cream and like post office people putting vegetables in my P.O. box. I'm taken care of. I'm held. I'm really going to live this lifestyle and then go back to the code switch when I'm online with the school in London, or I'm counseling with someone in South Africa, or I'm like doing my editorial work out of New York City, all from my laptop in my trailer on the river somewhere in Alabama. So I responded to that somatic experience where everything inside of me was like, yeah. And everything inside of me in my mind was like, no, what? But then I was like, all right, you be quiet, mind be quiet, body's just going to light it up. And I was so happy there. And I got to know people and really teach them about what life is like. Because bearing in mind, a lot of these folks out in the country, especially in the deep South rural areas, they don't leave town. And just like their mama, their papa, they living off the government, or they're, scratching by, maybe not even making legal money at all. They know nothing but what is immediately in front of them. And yet they are still citizens. They still have leverage and weight, supposedly, in the governance, right? And I'm over here doing my thing as an independent, unmarried woman. And we are equal on some levels. I don't think that's something that you think through. That's something you feel. And the humility to be like, shit, we can get down regardless of identity politics, regardless of me thinking I'm this or that, and if I want to think, I can be cool with you. That's a very Sagittarian thing. Oh, I can make it work with everybody, right? But the embodied experience was like, wow, we share this feral sort of like F the government, F mainstream culture. Like we're just here in our very small bubble of a couple of miles. And that was healing. And that was a gift. That was a gift to have that time and to be around people who let me live this irresponsible life. And again, I wasn't irresponsible. When I was on, professional me, I was on. When I was off, and I said, look, next week, don't come knocking on my trailer for 1 week. Leave me at it. I want nothing to do with nobody. All right, And I feel like I was able to, again, follow that embodied response. And then secondly, start to make sense of it. And then thirdly, know its value, know its worth. Because I wound up leaving Alabama. I had Planet Dust headquarters. It was a really nice big commercial space, and I was teaching there, and I had my office there, writing, reading. But what would happen is that I would have a lot of people stop by unannounced, out of hours. I had to do a lot of mm, kind teaching around boundaries. Um, and also, when you're so anti and so out of, I mean, you had to teach people how to hold appointments, how to pay for stuff, like while the whole lost boy, lost girl sort of, um, feral wild child is nice. And at another level, it didn't have currency because I was burning a lot of time having to do that translation. So I decided to leave Alabama and come back to Joshua Tree, which has been my spiritual home. I mean, look, I just picked up my trailer and just was like, whoop, moving my home to the other home. And as I've been here now for a few months, um, I feel more strongly called back to Alabama than ever because I've lost my sense of self here. What I do is I'm in the office 6 days a week. And again, global business means my time. I'm up some mornings at 3 a.m. in this time zone. I'm working some nights till 1 a.m. Pacific time for this person in this time. I get so into this heady identity that I lose that boisterousness. And I love that balance of that wild child. She needs to run them up too, and not just a day here and there, and not just like a spa treatment there, like, nah, there are some times that as a citizen, as an ambassador of living a whole narrative, I need to just like get gone. Somebody else needs to think for me. Somebody else needs to, and I recognize that is, I don't want to say the word culture is coming up, but that's not really true for what I think I want to express. What I want to express is that the very boisterous, extroverted Sagittarian her feet back down on the ground. And there ain't nobody around me checking that in communities where everyone is ambitious and everyone's got a mission and we all working and we all get like, who is turning around and going, you know what? The reality is none of this even matters. What matters is that while we're here on this third rock from the sun, we got to get out and smell the wind and hug the trees and roll in the mud and like, who gives a shit what gets dirty? So I think the Sagittarian in me is like, yeah, remember that.
I'm just like sitting here laughing because, like, listening with my astrologer ears, I'm like, oh my God, like, yeah, you're like the mouthpiece of Sagittarius. Everything from, there's this the rolling stone that gathers no moss, like, got to stay on the move, got to keep, checking new things out. Where's the new adventure?
Yeah.
Where's the new quest? Where's the uncharted territory? I want to be there. And also,
Yeah.
being the foreigner. Sagittarius speaks
Yeah.
to a lot of, what is beyond our immediate location or our immediate culture. It's the person that comes into, like, some field or culture that, quote unquote, doesn't belong there. And this is exotic, foreign, alien, just different. And there's a there's like a Sagittarian romance around that, in either being the one who
Yeah.
is different or being attracted to, like, this sort of, I have to be careful with this word, but exoticism, which now, we can people that can be a very extractive, fetishized type of thing. Oh, it's so exotic, right? Or it's foreign. But this whole idea of just something so different, like culturally or even ideologically, coming into a sphere, whether that's you or someone else. Also, I'm thinking about, the mutability of Sagittarius. Like, there's no way Sagittarius can stay in one place. Um, it needs to keep exploring and kind of pushing against Saturn. It's like, oh yeah, I see that boundary or I see that limit. That's exactly where I want to go, and like I want to like push against it or
Yeah.
traverse it. Um, and what else like caught my ear? Oh, and this story, you're absolutely like right. Not that you were trying to be like right about anything, but like this idea of narrative kept coming up. And when I was hearing you talk about narrative and maybe even multiple narratives, it made me think of how, and then when I said like, oh, like the narrative is fractured for a lot of people, it's, a lot of us were conditioned in this like kind of this monomyth, right? That was like really popularized, I think, by Joseph Campbell. This hero's journey, right? Where you are the protagonist and you have to, meet all these challenges and go on these adventures to find truth or find yourself or find something. But it's all based on this one person's point of view. And I think, especially in Western culture, all the stories and the media and the films that we get are built around this idea of a monomyth. And also in a lot of other cultures, there is like kind of one story or one way of telling a story. And that is seriously breaking apart for people who are invested in that kind of story. Even like with what's going on politically, it's really easy to just adopt these are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and there's this whole other like prefab story around that battle of the dark forces and the resistance, when it's so much more complex, nuanced than that, and also mobile. And that brings in the
Yeah.
movable truth, right, of Sagittarius. It doesn't really stay, or or it can also be like doubled down on. Like that's another, I think, shadow of Sagittarius is that
Yeah.
like they can have deep conviction over
Like you can't even get to me. Yeah.
yeah, over a story that's like purely personal, and speak about it in such a way that this is like an objective truth.
Yeah. Or it could be both. I wrote about it. So this is this is a critical theory book related to exceptional experiences. Exceptional experiences are things like near-death experiences, angelic encounters, maybe hearing voices, anything that's not part of the shared reality, aka shared narrative. And I wrote about it from the psychosynthesis point of view, um, where we hold both. We hold this sort of bifocal vision. That's the term that we used at the Institute in London, where I trained. I did not write this whole book. This is shout out to Dr. Glazer, to Jake, the co-editor of Minefield. But this is a work exploring those fringe places in the mind, and ways to think about things that we aren't always going to agree on, like is Sasquatch real or not? Where's the scientific data? But the personal experience is. So again, the truth, pushing the boundaries, and then bringing it back to a very tangible experience. Yeah, I think I've also spent a lot of time in my life with like being like a big-headed Jupiterian, like I'm I'm right, you're wrong. I'll own that, and not being able to entertain other people's truth or even opinions. And I think that that also comes down to truth being constructed out of our upbringing, out of our bonding styles, our emotional needs, out of the cultures. I call it the natal cultures that we were born into. And don't really think there's a monomyth at all. I think that when you bring in non-human creatures and you bring in the entire ecosystem of life, we got a whole lot of people and creatures and beings and things that are on their journeys. And I say that because in my journey on psychosynthesis, which is this spiritual psychology, couple steps farther down the rabbit hole from Jung, we like I like to say as a sort of an entry point. Sure, we'll bring you to the point of the numinous. You are a spiritual being having a human experience, but we'll bring you there to the edge. Then go ahead, you walk through the door and you make the meaning out of what you find there. And this is a journey of self-awareness and self-realization. The creator was highly influenced by yoga culture, by Eastern thought. And so I can say, for example, I'll never forget the day I was sitting up in my trailer, just out the door, looking at the river. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful, right? In Alabama. And after having practiced psychosynthesis, having studied for so many years, it's just like being in one never ending group kumbaya, like, therapy session. But like, okay, I had to dig deep and do a lot of inner work, right? And again, even there is Sadge, the psychology and the astrology and the far reaches of psychology. And I had this very transcendent experience, I dare say exceptional experience, where briefly I was out of my body, probably out of my mind, and just there with myself as a being of pure self-awareness. And I looked around, seeing the other trailers, all these folks that, I could other, or that many more educated people have othered, that I was looking around saying, these are my people too. I couldn't language why, but I'm like, these are my people. Like, feeling very defensive of something that I would have otherwise said not part of my journey. But in this very transcendent moment, and the experience of emptiness filled me. Love filled me. And when we are practicing in psychosynthesis, we sort of look at the model of the psyche and of consciousness and moving between different layers of consciousness. We look at it sort of like in an egg diagram. And in the middle is that middle conscious space, that point of awareness, the I that is here, that has an identity, that is moving along in life in this linear Saturn journey. Below that is the subconscious. Above that is the superconscious. Again, above, below are just arbitrary, because really where there is no like up or down in time or space. It just is, right? But in different layers of consciousness, deeper or more ascended. The point of integration, doing the work, clearing out the mind, understanding your behavior patterns, understanding why and what you do, going to those more transcendent states. I feel like this is starting to tap into the Aquarian phase of this conversation. It's self-realization and it's awareness and it's freedom from the trauma that had previously not only held you down, but caused you to think in a certain way and to align with a certain narrative or identity that you might have not even known that you were doing. So I was sitting there on the trailer, probably drinking coffee, because I'm always drinking coffee. And I was like, well, shit, I could have seen my family here. Again, it was a very similar environment to what I grew up in. But I was like, some of them are not so nice people. So, okay, they're not here. But would they ever know that I chose this? I chose what I fled from. And I came right back to where I was. And this goes back to the whole remembering. And I think also part of the process of me really like bumpy knucking my inner child going, oh shit, yeah, you didn't change. You kept that fierce nature that is innate to you, that wild child. Like, like I said, she's in the woods. Good luck finding her, right? In the woods with her sci-fi books. That's literally how I was when I was growing up in New Jersey. And here I am having this moment where there was nothing but love. There was a deep understanding, granted, after many, many years of education and therapy, there was this deep understanding and empathy and compassion for a lot of the players in my life, a lot of the characters in my life. And we're talking instability, mental health, severe mental health issues. A lot of those changeling reality character types, right? And I chose the same thing. I came back home to exactly what I fled from. That narrative, if you want to call it something like, the hero's journey. Well, shoot, that's a circle for me because I came right back to this point and I was like, yeah, I'd choose this. Now, again, I had to leave because Alabama's got some really funky tax laws, no tax parity. There was limited. There were certain legal things that I couldn't get above, some economic things that I left. I said I'm gonna go out, build my business, do some things, not realizing that I would say, yeah, I'm gonna go back. And in fact, once I left, once I was towing out west, I was like, you know what? I think this is just leveling up. This is Alabama part two. My love for the place and what is there was deepened as I left because it's kind of like in a relationship. Like, you can't give me what I need. I need more education, more economic opportunity for my business. Okay, so I can't get it here. I'm gonna go. I did not expect that I would say, but this was home because it grounded me, because it gives me the certain things that I could be out zip zooming all over the globe, right? But that's where I get to go home, turn off, and be me. And I recognize how valuable that is for balancing the Sagittarian fire. And it's also about knowing the duality. I know some days I'm gonna just shut off. When I'm 80 years old, I'm gonna still be that 8-year-old girl jumping into muddy puddles, eating too much candy for breakfast. That young girl, she ain't gonna go nowhere because she's timeless. She is part of my soul that came in as a Sagittarian with Gemini rising. Maybe my physical body will age and will be conditioned and will also respond to the cultures around me. But that timeless piece, that's me, that I have tapped into, she knows that's what's up. Yeah, I think that thought was complete. That story is complete. So, okay. Because you wind me up and I'm just like, woo, I go.
It's like that's like I know I have a lot of Sagittarian friends, and like you ask like a question, it might even be very specific. You're not just going to get an answer. You're going to get the whole story plus what that story reminds them of, and then a tangent, and then a backstory, and then like there's like
We storytellers, yeah.
yeah, it's you're gonna get like the whole perspective, the whole and multiple perspectives. And I as I was listening to you talk, as I was like kind of like thinking, okay, Gemini Sagittarius made me think of Sagittarians and animism, and how it's a very Sagittarian type of thing to go, of course there's multiple perspectives, and the perspectives of the trees and flowers and bees and horses are right on par with that of the humans. Even you mentioned earlier how the cosmos is not something that just, if we're centering the human experience on, that humans look to. The cosmos is very much like checking us out and wanting to see itself reflected back to it. And I think Sagittarius really gets that animistic part, like that we're not, we're not just like friends of the earth and nature, like we are of it. We are an expression of the dirt. We are an expression of all of it. And, if we're talking astrology, we're an expression of the cosmos. And then you brought up the word, and this is going to take us into Gemini. You brought up the word bifocal, which I just think is so Gemini. And the ability to like see at close range and far away, see left and right. And when Gemini, which is your rising sign, the opposite sign of Sagittarius, is working well, it can have these multiple perspectives and is very genius at synthesizing them. And when Gemini maybe is not working so well, it kind of bounces back and forth between all the perspectives or flip flops and can actually deconstruct, which also isn't bad because I think that's one of the things that Mercury needs to do. Mercury being like mechanical in nature needs to take things apart and put them back together and take things apart, put them back. Like that's just what it does. And when we have Gemini and Sagittarius working together, we have all the pieces, the data, the information, all the little bits, and then the Sagittarian or Jupiterian need to cohere and make meaning, and how they really do need each other. But when they go their different ways, I think that's when we get into trouble. So, but going back into, Gemini, Sagittarius, Mercury, Jupiter, you natally, you have Mercury in Sagittarius. And in like Hellenistic astrology, that's said to be in its fall. Like Mercury doesn't love Sagittarius so much, or that's the story. And I'm wondering how do you feel Mercury being in Sagittarius works for you? Like how do you work with it?
Here's the thing. All right. Got another story. Gearing up. Um, I think it's just like going back to an idea that different parts need to talk to each other because we ain't gonna come to an alignment if we're not talking. And Mercury is being in a detriment to me really opens up the space to say, all right, then, well, what was once working ain't working anymore. How can we create this new reality to step into? And with that, I also have like, I want to answer in two ways. First, um, so again, I grew up in New Jersey, and as a young kid, I really loved not just sci-fi, science fiction, and fiction. I loved parapsychology. I mean, it's part of my career now. And I read this book by George Hansen, who happened to live in New Jersey. And it's called The Trickster and the Paranormal. And again, I was just some young one, teenager. Okay, I'm into weird stuff. And he talks about how in parapsychology research, government-based research, everyone wants to know why not. There's this like changing factor, this changeable energy. We can't expect someone to reliably see the future. We can't expect this sort of spiritual element or the spirit element to always show up. Why? And a couple of years later, I was at a conference where he was on a panel and with a couple of other folks who were writing about this. And essentially the question is, the question posed was, well, if we're knocking, why aren't they knocking back? Or why aren't they knocking back all the time? And I remember watching that going, y'all just ain't asking the right questions, duh. Or you're taking too much of your human experience expecting an answer to these non-human forms of communication. So that's one piece of the story. George Hansen lived in Princeton, and also in Princeton was a lab called the Pear Laboratories. It was the paranormal and exceptional, no, not exceptional, engineering anomalies research laboratory. They did research into mind matter interaction. Essentially, they had this 14, 15-foot machine, looked like a Plinko machine. They named it Murphy, where, if balls are dropping down the wall, if someone sitting there, can they influence the direction of the ball? Can it fall, right? So I had read the book written by two of the main researchers. The woman's name was Brenda Dunn, and the fella's name was Robert Yan. I loved it so much. Again, as a teenager, I don't even think I emailed. I think I wrote a letter and I said, I really want to come. And they wrote back or something. They said, you should come visit the lab, and I just literally showed up one day and was in this consciousness research laboratory in the basement of Princeton. And it was super cool. I went, and I was just always drawn to this interaction, can a mind influence the matter? And then also because George Hansen was in this community, he's asking the question of, okay, but if you can't influence the ball, if you can't interact with matter, and if it's not talking back to you, what's going on here? Okay. So fast forward many years later, Brenda is no longer here. The lab has shut down. I don't know where George is at. Every now and again, I see him online, but but one of the people who also worked at the lab, his name is Roger Nelson, and every now and again I'll bump into him at online conferences. I don't know if I've seen him in a real-time conference. I don't know if was he in Mexico? Anyway, so what Roger Nelson has done is he took and created a random number generator in the form of an egg. So basically, essentially, what that big wall-sized machine did, he put it into a tiny little package, into an egg, and sent many of these eggs across the world. The same idea. Can we influence mind matter? Is there this consciousness, aka the trickster? And by this time, I had gotten into astrology, and I was like, oh, this is clearly Mercury. Y'all are tangling with Mercury, man. Because this is communication. This is the information, right? And I was actually just, last night or maybe the night before reading one of Roger's most recent papers. And so what he has is called the Global Consciousness Project. And when there are significant events across the globe, also, thinking about global events, and we only know about them through major mainstream media, are there fluctuations in energy? So for example, as the eggs are running, you can expect a certain amount of background noise, a certain amount of data signal being put out there. When something happens, like 9/11, like the most recent presidential election, what Roger has reported is that the energy wonks out. He's influenced by Pierre Chardin, who is a French philosopher, who was a French philosopher. What Chardin said, and what Roger is building upon, is he's calling this global net of consciousness the noosphere, Noosphere. He's saying that there is this emergent feature in Earth And to me, I'm hearing Gaia consciousness. I'm hearing so many people in the spiritual community saying this collective earth awakening experience. He's like, are we mapping the new sphere? Is this the universe talking to us? And yet again, maybe I'll write about it, for Mindfield or something for the online publication. I'm like, yeah, but y'all are just asking, y'all are framing it and translating in a way that is true, but also another true version is the universe is laughing at y'all. It's been knocking all this time. There is sentient communication. There is this layer of information that we are engaging with. Although we don't see it, it is there. We are measuring it. We just looking at it from our constructed, educated point of view. But take all of that away. Because the other side of that axis is the outsider. I love that you brought up the idea to not fetishize anything that's exotic. And here is where I say, do not fetishize the outsider, because again, all this work that I do, the hokey pokey, it ain't about me. It's about transforming the narrative of mental health, because the outsider is one who hears the voices, who does talk to the trees, who has a personality that's maybe a little more open, big, loud. I sure as heck has been the outsider, So in some translations, we pathologize communication with the earth. In other translations, we are codifying it through science, coming full circle to Mercury and the detriment in Sagittarius. Again, one interpretation, one way to slice up and imprint consciousness onto the fabric of time-space. I'm like, yeah, so I can see the forest from the trees here. I can see both. The parts that are talking, that need to start talking, is the embodiment that both can be true. And this sort of comes to where I am now in my own, not just research, but approach in how I work with individuals, because I do work with a lot of neurospicy and folks who have exceptional experiences, right? And this also comes down to what I believe. Again, very much Mercury and Sadge. What I believe are all things are true. I tend to prescribe to the model of the psyche and and consciousness through psychosynthesis, but I'll step away, and let you have your story. I think all stories are true at every given time. And it ain't even about me, not having the ability to judge or impose. It's just about agency. If it is true for you, then it's true for me. Now, there's something in counseling where it's kind of like you're not supposed to go into, encourage the magical thinking of another person or just their perhaps schizoid or aberrant reality. But I'm like, why not? Because most of the time, you othering them, you making them the outsider, you saying, I can't have a part in this conversation, let alone translation. But I'm like, why not? Pull up a chair, let's have a conversation and see each other as beings. And again, I've taken you on a massive journey, so I'm going to stop there. I do have something to say about the butterfly effect in reconciling this whole Mercury and Sag sitch, but I'm gonna take a sip of coffee.
Of course you do. No, you brought there was so much.
I know. Like, sorry, not sorry.
My astrologer ears. And yeah, Mercury in a Jupiter ruled sign, Sagittarius or Pisces. We get the old stories of astrology told by, a lot of old men about how, Mercury doesn't work right in these signs for many reasons. But, these stories change as, our consciousness expands and we learn more. And yeah, Mercury might not be as great or facile at doing traditional Mercury things, but it still operates. It's just doing different things.
And that's the point.
As
Yeah.
time goes on, culturally, socially, we are starting to be more cognizant and embrace these other ways that a mind can perceive, people can communicate, ways we get information. It's not just intellectual. And I really like so one of my teachers is Rick Levine, and he's a modern astrologer, and I always really loved how he kind of challenged this idea of, when we get into like Mercury, Jupiter, like polarities, how, Jupiter is the right brain and Mercury is the left brain, logical and analytical, and the other side of the brain is creative and holistic. And he's like, actually, Mercury is the corpus callosum that that translates things between the right side and the left side of the brain, which I think is more fitting for the whole story of Mercury. Like, especially like Mercury as psychopomp, being able to go into other realms of consciousness. He went to the underworld, talked to the gods, was among the people, like, and Mercury was the only one who could traverse different realms and either stitch them together or pull them apart. Um, and so as we are, becoming more aware and cognizant of things like, neurodivergence, and having not othering neurodivergence as a wrong way or a way of misperceiving. It's just an other way. um it's it's confusing things for people who are attached to the idea, and again, the story of, like, how do we discern, what is real from what is fictional, what is the truth, what is not. And then here we're getting into like the meat, I think, of the astrology from now until January. It's this Mercury Jupiter thing. How do we make meaning? And I have a Sagittarius Gemini opposition in my chart as well.
Mm.
And as with all oppositions, like internally, we can other our other placement, we can inhabit one placement and other the the other pole. And that's actually when we enter, I think, a realm of like pure fabrication. Like, if I'm totally like pushing my Gemini stuff away and totally immersing myself in some purely biased, subjective story, that's not quite, that is not the whole story. I'm not bringing in like a lot of other facets and other parts of the story that might even conflict, but make the story complete and whole. And if I go
Oh,
and
right.
just do the Gemini thing without entertaining the Sagittarius, and I'm just like really in like my data and my conversations and all these pieces, like that's all I have are pieces. I haven't figured out a way to make to do the you know all of these pieces of data and experience or bits of story are kind of useless until we make meaning out of them, which is the Jupiter and Sagittarius part of it. But if you know other either side, you're not getting the whole story. And then when you add emotion to that, which I think is like what I'm seeing, like around me everywhere, and the people I talk to, um there there's like this mass confusion, delusion, and because of the emotional attachment, when certain stories get pushed or interrupted in some way, there's a great deal of like anger or destabilization, because people do need their stories. I think like that's story is a human sense. It's not just, it's not just literary. Like as human beings, I think from the time we're like pre-verbal, we're like putting together meaning, even if it's small, where we're putting together that means that, and that's like that. We're using metaphor even before we're actually using like verbal language.
Yeah. Yeah, but here's the thing. Queen storyteller over here. We also don't need those stories because we are just passing through. Many lifetimes are going to come and go, endless cycle. All right, that's a little highfalutin. Let me bring it back down. What we need and what I have been moved to is radical accountability. Okay. No more of this radical compassion, love bombing. No, that has a strange, that has a not good connotation. I ain't going to hug it out with you. I'm going to love you, but I'm going to say, but this is what you needed to do. And where that starts to become really relevant is me making a boundary. This is me knowing my Saturn work is buttoned up because it's saying, okay, this was my truth. You tread on it. This is what I need, and you ain't giving it to me. Okay, I'm gonna walk away. I am not beholden to, a boyfriend who isn't loving me the way that I need to, who isn't doing the things, that I want him to. All right, I ain't married to the story that I need a man to support me, or that I need to exist in a reflection of a man or in a relationship. I'm accountable to myself. If I'm not getting what I need, I'm gonna walk. And I think that it becomes so very, very important, but also actionable in these times, and especially through January, because this inauguration is going to happen, and I know the climate in America. Well, look, I'll just say I got some folks that I've been talking to up in the West Coast area. I'm in California. Some folks out in Oregon, whatever. Some folks out in New York. When you get on a call with them and you can feel the anxiety and you can feel their perceived notions of freedom being trampled upon. So look, y'all head down to the South and they're like, finally, we get in our time on the mic. Finally, we're heard. Now, am I saying that the Trumpster is a nice person or even fully human? No. But what I'm saying is the perceived, I'm like, must be rocking stuff across time and space. It's fallen the second time. Okay. Look, most people have not had a healthy, nurturing relationship full of equanimity, complete, wholesome parenting. Y'all are going to have some kind of like situation going on, needs may or may not be needing met. So then you look at someone like Donald Trump. He is like polished and perfected narcissist. He got this whole abuse cycle, love bomb abuse. I'm going to tell you what you need. You're going to believe me. And then I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to cry foul and just completely divert the attention. Right. But most people don't know how to discern that. They need to feel seen. So they got this figurehead who ain't really doing nothing anyway. Right. In power. And those folks are now happy because their perceived story is playing out. The other folks who feel so much injustice, but like, look, Walt ain't much better either. She just got a more digestible package. Stop bonds. Just stop the bonds. That's all I'll say. Okay. And now those folks are the ones going, my liberties are being tread on. I'm afraid. But I'm like, yeah, but what have you done locally in your community? These people, or this play is happening on media so complete. Like, do you have coffee with them in the morning? Do you shop with them at your local whatever market? Nah. these are stories that are so detached and they're so in the cloud. And real time, y'all are going to act on it. We're going to act on it. I feel it, because I'm holding both out here in this ultra liberal Southern California, la la land. And then my folks down on their trailers going woohoo, and yeah, some of them put them little maxi pads on their ears. And yes, I did side eye when I encountered that. I ain't gonna change me. I'm just gonna, and that is the integrity that I think that like we need to model to actually overcome these fractured narratives. Because at a certain point, it's such a gift to be able to put on my own glasses as Anastasia, as this mental health care professional, as educated as I am. And I can look at someone and be like, do, right? And see them as that. Or I could take off my glasses and go face to face, human to human. Man, you're a dick. Or wow, actually, I don't know nothing about you, but this feels good. Yeah. And that is that inner child, that uncultured, it ain't even the rewilded. That's that very innate, just instinctual resonance coming from my body. And I always say the electromagnetic field, but like, hi, there's the education. Look, it feels good, right? When I encounter some person and then maybe I get to know them and I'm like, ooh, spiky. But then I'm like, no, but really? Just because of what this person thinks? For example, the immigration thing. Look, I am very vocal about immigration, very vocal about the fact that I was not able to get a visa to do some graduate work in Europe, very vocal about the fact there's been plenty of times I've been on the other side of borders going, shit, I'm not legal here. Because I have traveled a lot, and I'll say that. So then when I'm watching stuff about the border, recently Texas granted some ranch land or something where immigrants who are being deported can go. And some people are like, rah, rah, rah. Like, this is like the thing, like the right has to really leverage and poke the wound of the progressive policies and the progressive shortcomings, right? See, this didn't work. So boom, I'm gonna stick it to you, right? But like, look, you was going and eating that Mexican food. Like, hi, I'm a border hopper myself. And like, I've had the same issues of having to leave a country because I couldn't get legal and I was moving for economic and educational betterment, So we the same. And I have had this conversation with quite a few people, again, bringing it back to the South, because these people don't leave their towns that they grew up in. How are you going to have the same equity in voting and being part of the society where who has globetrotted many people who make laws, we're coming at it from different standpoints, but we are not the same, but we are the same because we have to see that story. And so that's where like all this like sort of smoke starts to come out, billowing out the ears, billowing out the windows, where it's like, okay, now until January, this is Jupiter teaching us we need to get off our high horse or stay there and cause the discord, because the societal reverberations, the intention is going to set the way, the energy is going to ripple through. If it's going to be janky and uncomfortable for the next 4 years, okay, well, I'm not going to change, but like, I also ain't having the experience like that. I'm going to still do me. So that way, I think too, and I have seen this played out again and again. Part of my practice, my self-practice, is reflection. And of course, we go so far back. We go back to like yoga and Mudita Yoga Center. And like, yoga is my practice, perhaps maybe not so much the asana, but getting down into that reflection. Astrology is yoga of meeting, the moments of time and space. In this present moment, what is actually happening? So in my self-reflection practices and through this massive change and experience of living in Alabama, prior to that living in New Orleans, prior to that going through some pretty crunchy stuff in the Hudson Valley, thinking, oh, this would never happen here, but it did, I had to say, not only who am I, but who am I to other people and society? Because when push comes to shove, the hound dogs are going to come out. And what I have been doing is applying pressure to that, leaning into those uncomfortable spaces, because I just, I say, look, safely, you can lose your mind, go crazy. See you on the other side, right? Because there's something to it. Something that one of the founders of the Institute of Psychosynthesis, Joan, in London, where I trained and studied, something that she talks about is chaos theory, the butterfly effect. So it comes to a point where in an individual's trajectory towards self-awareness, you realize that the universe is working through you, and this middle conscious, this personality that you're living, again, it's just kind of spices, flavor on your salad of life. But you're really here also because the universe put you here, and you're here to serve and be more aware of that. Remember that. But what happens is, after so much awareness, and I'm so grateful to have been in that container because it really helped, right? I was putting so much pressure. I was doing the work, and then I was looking at people around me differently who weren't doing the work, who were really feeding the ego, but I would say, okay, this is coming up for me. I let it go. This is coming. Oh, I'm changing. Okay. I'm rolling with the change. Okay. And it got to a point where karma started to break, as in I wasn't constellating the same repetitive patterns. I was making different choices, and I was really leveraging my own agency and chip. Okay. No longer a victim of certain things that I was too proud to admit I was playing the victim, but I was totally a victim. And then let that shit go. And it comes to a point that Joan guided me and guided the rest of my cohort, where you change and your part in other people's story changes. And this isn't some perception phenomenology, Merleau-Ponty type shit. This is, look, the momentum is different. Things are going to go in a different way. So kind of like Ariadne's knot, right? In the Greek myth, you're unwinding the story. What is the turning point? What is the beginning point? Do you ever get to a beginning point? Because even if you took an agent out, or even if you took someone out of a timeline and, change the course of history, or it's a paradox, because you're also changing all other possible simultaneous lifetimes, stories, timelines at the same time. Again, very high, very, very, very high level. So the point is that I spent quite a few months just kind of walking around and having my own course in self-awareness, and going like, oh shit, that person wasn't really a dick. Maybe he's a dick, but like, they really did that because they really thought they had the upper hand, and that's really what they needed. I'm going to love them anyway. Oh, you're coming at me? Okay, boo, when you're done, we'll talk, and it's just like, I was not attached to having to be right or wrong. I was not attached to whatever the outcome was. It was like, all right, well, it is what it is. I'm here. I'm me. What's good? Who's got some chocolate? Where, what? It wasn't about having to see my story played out. It was about that really free, I'm always going to eat. I'm always going to drink coffee. My basic needs, right? I was out of the head and into this body. And the butterfly effect was watching just how much another person maybe lacked some self-awareness and could get so riled up at things where I was like, I have absolutely no control over that. And you're so embedded in a system. You are so embedded in a corrupt system, and this programming, you don't even realize that's you, Matrix. You think you're not, but you are the Matrix. Once you can get to that point of not just compassion, but pure joy, then you're free.
Okay.
I'll pause. I'm like, woo. Told you I was wound up today. I was on when I woke up.
Well, I mean, like you have this going back and forth on. I mean, I'm used to you talking, but I have to say, I'm hearing a lot of like. So we're recording this on November 23rd. Mercury
Hmm.
stations retrograde in Sagittarius on the 25th. So Mercury's pretty much hanging out right now.
I got the megaphone. Okay.
And you have Jupiter going back and forth across your ascendant in Gemini. So
Yeah.
so people are gonna like hear this, see this, and they'll get just like a flavor from like everything you're speaking about. And so I want to contextualize this in the actual transits of the next 6 weeks, especially as they pertain to Jupiter and Mercury. So the situation is right now is that Jupiter is in Gemini, which is the place of its, quote unquote detriment, not, difficult to do Jupiterian things in Gemini. And Mercury is in Sagittarius. We already talked about that being in detriment. But that means Mercury is in Jupiter's sign and Jupiter is in Mercury's sign, and they have mutual reception.
They
And
got to talk.
Jupiter's retrograde, Mercury is about to go retrograde. And because of that, they make some degree based oppositions between now and January. So we're going to get a lot of this, I don't have anything better than, it's just like your peanut butter's in my chocolate and your chocolate's in my peanut butter. Wait, what? Like this, like I almost see narratives being like flipped and turned inside out. And again, if you have some kind of attachment to all the things you're hearing, you brought in mainstream media. I think some shit like like whatever is passing for news or information through mainstream media is going to go through some like big changes and overhauls as we're seeing the stories that are expressed through mainstream media are largely propaganda. America is one of the most propagandized nations in the world, and I think very slowly some people are coming to that. There's still some people that, that's where they're getting a lot of their information. A lot of that shit's changing. Then I think of this as a Gemini Mercury thing. A lot of like social media is changing. Who knows what's going to happen with that? But it's all in flux, and people are getting their information. They're cobbling together a lot of different things from their if they're in an echo chamber, which I think of as more of a Sagittarian thing, or if they're more adventurous and like really trying to engage different points of view, Gemini thing, and then like trying to put all this together. And I know you're like, narrative, schmerative. But I still think that's like a really strong urge um, for a lot of people because they're
Oh,
laying
yeah.
on this like larger story, and this is where it's going to get interesting. And then the whole Trump thing, I couldn't help like when you brought in the Trumper. And I've been looking at his chart for the past several months, and he has like one of the strongest Gemini Sagittarius signatures I have ever seen. It's an exact full. He was born on an exact full moon in Sagittarius. So the sun is in Gemini, moon's in
You can't get
Sagittarius,
through that knucklehead. Yeah,
and it's
that's what I'm
exact.
hearing.
And he
Yep.
was born on a lunar eclipse with the North Node on his sun in Gemini and the South Node on his moon in Sag. And I see it. I totally, he really animates that signature so perfectly. Um, all of it, the bigness, the speaking out of 10 sides of his mouth, like all of that. He also embodies a lot of the Leo placement all together. It's a pretty extraordinary representation. So something I think there's a lot more stuff going down with whatever he's doing over the next 6, 7 weeks. But I want to talk about, so the astrology is, we have those oppositions between Jupiter and Mercury that are in each other's signs, having mutual reception and retrograde. They make those oppositions on December 4th and December 26th. And then we have a sun in Sagittarius opposing Jupiter and Gemini on December 7th. And I'm circling December 7th because also on that day, there's like a triple conjunction at 0 degrees Aquarius between Pluto, Ceres, and Venus. And that's the whole cast pretty much of the story of Persephone. So there's like some super interesting stuff happening around the 7th. And I think of Aquarius and Sagittarius as sort of these kind of outlier signs that tell stories from like the galaxy. They're able to like pull so far out that you can see bigger arrangements and architectures than if we were to like zoom in on isolated little like points of information. So yeah, that this first week of December is really um like galaxy brain. That term comes to mind. It's like just opening up. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so that's really interesting for, and I also just want to say too that the stories that I'm bringing in are just so that people can hear a different point of view and you have a choice. And we also had the transition from Pluto and Capricorn for real into Pluto and Aquarius. I felt that major this week in my client practice, where I had people calling with some pretty extraordinary situations to work through. But I bring that up because for me, Persephone represents the pattern breaking. She's like a microcycle of time. Ceres, of course, one can argue it's being related to the cycles of time of the earth. And then Persephone is related to time. For me, in my practice, this is how we talk about it, because Persephone is that subconscious, that place. If you're really deep in trauma and you're out of time. This is what my mentor and I, Dr. Schaub, have talked about. You're not in your present moment. So again, the self-awareness is not there, but you're maybe making actions and reactions based on things that happened in the past, maybe even in the distant past. And in my practice, again, because it is very expansive, we do go into the Akashic field. We can go back across timelines, because if that's meaningful for you, we're going to bring it into your story in this present moment. Not conventional, not necessarily something that most other mental health care practitioners talk about, and I look for the Persephone signatures, and when they're strong in someone's chart, Persephone is actually really close to my Pluto too. So maybe this is why I'm so comfortable going into those deep, deep dark spaces. In fact, I know it is. For me, Persephone is kind of like the quickening. And then when that experience that had been stuck in time space comes up, the body reacts. And it's almost like that emotion coming up is like Persephone walking her way out the cave, finding Ceres again, redefining that nurture relationship, because you're changed and maybe she ain't so angry at her mama anymore, or maybe you're not so angry at something. But whenever I see Persephone in a cycle, I'm like, okay, we might be looking at a little bit of rupture, maybe a little bit of a even spiritual awakening, and then bringing it up into Aquarius, the whole Aquarian flavor. I foresee a lot of people, if they're really doing the work, being present, and also acknowledging that maybe their mind has changed, going into a lot of rupture from the superconscious. And what that means is that just like you can hold, an individual can hold something in the subconscious in their own individual body, the superconscious, again, my ideas, things that I am working on research and expanding, I think is a higher octave of Jupiter, a planet, an archetype that we haven't even named yet. I mean, they're floating around ideas, more planets out there in the solar system. But again, here the universe is expanding, and we are literally reading the data in a way that maybe we're missing something. So the higher octave of Jupiter is that you tweak this collective timeline, you tweak the experience for others. And there's no better time for than the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius in the next, many years that we're going to spend in this, not only questioning our humanity, but questioning our interconnection. Because look, I can't heal if you can't give me what I need. And if I don't get what I need, I don't realize that I need that shit. I see people upholding sometimes even this tribal mentality, keeping it into the old systems, keeping it the very Jupiterian, well, the family is the core unit and the institutions of education, of law, of governance, they've been there, they have been established, that's what we follow. And I'm like, look, these things have gotten so big and bloated. Media has gotten so bloated. I defect, man. It doesn't affect me anymore. And what I will say to that, I ain't gonna lie, I've become a Swiftie over the past year. I stinking love Taylor Swift. Me and my whole anti-mainstream anything, right? I feel like gosh, every time I say something I'm gonna kind of hold it. I feel that Taylor Swift is sort of this embodiment of and she's also December 13th is her birthday. She's a Sadge. She is this embodiment of knowing herself and her autonomy. And yes, she comes from privilege. Hi, you nice little $1 million house. You grew up white. You're a woman, but you had your parents. They're still supporting you. You had all the emotional support to be that wrench in the system that many other marginalized and disregarded people couldn't be. I ain't talking about her talent. I think she put her, honor studentness to the test. She's making her money with it, right? But what she's also doing is navigating a system that isn't quite human. And she's doing it from a humanistic point of view. In my opinion, come at me if you want, we'll have a dance off. I think that in knowing where our narratives are going and what we need as individuals, look, again, I never thought that I just wanted to do my own thing in life, to have people coming at me for counseling service, for guidance, for have folks calling me up for my professional opinions on stuff. I'm like, what? I just want to, again, have my coffee and chocolate in the woods. But there comes a responsibility with that I have been like, okay, I don't want to just hide out anymore. I'll stand in that. And I will grow into this role where you are now looking to me as the authority for something. So with Taylor Swift, am I saying, do I trust mainstream media? No. But what I'm saying is that each person has their karma and each person has their place. And so what I think we're going to see is the people who can be the most human in a role that wants to dehumanize them and is part of a dehumanizing system anyway. That's for me where this mutual reception happens. But okay, potato, tomato. It is what it is. And that's how the story actually advances, because then you're not creating that emotionality. You're not creating that intellectual resistance one way or the other. You're saying, all right, here's the solidarity. The accountability is you're doing this thing. You're selling out stadiums, 100,000 of people on people are listening to you. Okay, that's your power and you are holding it with grace. The incoming president is going to throw a lot of wrenches in the system, but in people's emotional system, but also holding that person accountable. Why you even got a hand in this pot? How is this affecting your story, and how can you be informed also by the Aquarian vibe to go a little higher into self-realization, to know that he's just running his own monkey train anyway, right? So in the fractured narrative, I need the narrative and then I let it go, because then I need to be this inner child, this soul being who is here on earth. I'm here to do a thing. I'm here to heal a thing, and then let it go and just be. And I really feel that like this is what Persephone has taught me, and maybe can inspire others to look at in their behavior patterns and thoughts. And then again, with this backdrop of Pluto and Aquarius, like, just be human and we'll get through it.
So on the 19th, so we're getting into 2 hours, Anastasia. So I want to keep this. Let's
I'm
stick to
pausing.
more astrology. But no, so Venus does that thing. There's that triple conjunction with the characters of the Persephone myth at 0 Aquarius. And then on the 19th, Venus, now in Aquarius, makes a trine to Jupiter and Gemini, which in that brings in, I think, a lot of the things that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
Just now. And then on the 24th, we get the second hit of Jupiter square Saturn, which is a really big deal on a bigger timeline. We already had that first square earlier this year, and then there's another one coming up in 2025. But when Jupiter and Saturn get together, we are looking at changing timelines, changing stories, changing the architecture of whatever we consider to be, real. Which is what makes December, I think, like a real mind bender. And some people are gonna love it, and some people are gonna hate it, and some people are not gonna know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, and just trust it. Trust that process. Yeah, it's all fine.
It's all fine.
We're here to say it's all fine.
And so I just kind of want to recap some things maybe to look for. Jupiter and Mercury, like bottlenecks of information. Like we're gonna be getting a lot of stuff of varying quality. But like like you were saying, like I can sit here and like judge, oh, this is true and that's not true, this is useful, that's not useful. But like who the fuck am I? You can use even information of whatever, like low quality, it doesn't matter. This is just matter. There's just so much shit flying around, and you're going to interact with it or not.
And that's your choice.
Your own capacity. Like we can only handle so much. And as you were talking about, I was thinking of another like way to think about this, like Mercury Jupiter thing, and something I've been seeing a lot. As people are trying to hold on to their identity via story and information, it's like we all have like this like kind of weird shaped puzzle piece, and it's unique, and we're looking at everybody else and they have some different shaped puzzle piece, and we're like, no, that doesn't look like mine, that's different from me. Where are the people who have the same shaped puzzle piece as me? And people not wanting to like look at someone with a differently shaped puzzle piece and just kind of get together, do the Gemini thing of, oh wait, even though they're very different, they somehow fit together. And that if enough people did that, we would have like a big picture made up of a lot of very unique different pieces and perspectives. But I see a lot of people just being kind of very, just wanting to hang out with their own puzzle piece until they see someone who has the same shape. And it's like, what use is that? And that's where we get, like our echo chambers of like social media and even our little social groups where we only want to be with people who aren't, going to introduce things that allow us to change our perception, our story. Um, that would lead, and a lot of people I see also saying, well, I am engaging and I am trying to learn and do research, but in only one vein that feels comfortable, which is basically just confirmation bias. That's like a salve for the nervous system. It's like, yeah, we're okay. I'm right. Again, a Sagittarian thing. I'm right about this.
Yeah. And you brought up the confirmation bias as something that we might bring up. Just going to loop back into the previous story about the pear labs. And you know what, I grew up around certain ideas and I was doing certain things. And it's not just about continuity. It's about the fact that when I stopped looking for certain things and I stepped back and saw the bigger picture, those interconnected pieces, the helping hands were already there. And so I think, yes, honoring and acknowledging that it's scary as heck to change your story.
Yeah.
Call me, I can help with that. But if you really start to trust in the bigger picture, which for me is also a Jupiter sort of an elevation of it, there is a grander design. And when you stop just looking for the information and you start to really say, but what is actually happening, those strands, those strings emerge. And honestly, with the astrology, my birthday's on the 16th, so I'm gonna love this month. But maybe I won't love this month, But I'm just also just being with, I have so much hope for humanity, and I have so much love and see potential, and I'm like, but it's that loving nudge, like, come on, guys, let that story go, you know.
Yeah, and this is,
And you'll get through it. This month is going to be chunky, but you'll get through it. Yeah.
there's one last thing, issue I want to bring up and like have people maybe look for or spot is in dealing with all of this, engaging critical thinking and what is that even versus indoctrination. Because when we're on the Gemini-Sagittarius axis, that brings in, education, like just in general, and learning and teaching, education,
And what's valued as education. Yeah.
and what is education in America? If you're in, we're thinking about like bricks and mortar institutes of learning, is largely indoctrination. It's not teaching the Gemini aspect of learning to question, learning to discern, learning how to organize yourself sort of emotionally so that you can engage with difference and hold it, and maybe even hold two, three, four, five different truths and stories, which I think is like a more universal truth. I know this is another topic, but it's a Sagittarian one. It's like, what is truth? Like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, do you have a book for that?
I have a book for that. This is my most recent work of autofiction. It's a choose your own adventure. So look, I went through spiritual emergence. I was kind of like schlepping it through Latin and South America, going through different versions of myself. And I invite the reader to say, who am I to you? In that experience of traveling and having to translate and explain who I was, people's points of references weren't always the same. And I was getting angry because I was like, I'm this. Why don't you get it? But you know what? Between the Spanish, between me being out of my head, look. So I did this book. I understand again that even questioning, everybody wants to think different, right? But how do you do it? And then how do you let your world crumble and change? It's terrifying. So try it out with the Choose Your Own Adventure book. This is real stories. And I let you make choices about what you can do, where you might go with me, who am I to you? And just like you're saying, holding a couple of different truths, like how many permutations of this book are there? So getting out of the intellectual experience of it, the left brain of like the logic of the ideas, and I'm thinking, just be. And that's art. So this is creative writing, it's that expression, but it's also the art of figuring out who you are. And I think this is also, if anything, the invitation to start that practice wherever you are in life. The astrology absolutely invites that.
Yeah,
And so does the book.
another like huge Sagittarian thing, choosing your own adventure, whether in
Of
a
my
book,
story.
a story, or in life. That's like such a huge Sagittarian thing. But I think where sometimes people get stuck with that kind of thing is then again, you choose your own adventure, you choose your story, and then you say, and this is the universal truth. Like
Right.
it's to everyone should be able to choose their own adventure and story and allow for someone else to say, oh, yeah, that's your truth. That's cool. Here's
Yeah.
mine. And
Yeah.
it's valid.
Yeah.
Like,
Or don't choose your own adventure and I'm gonna walk away.
yeah.
I'm accountable to me to not making you do something you don't want to do or
So,
can't do.
but, so your birthday's on the 16th. So little, and I don't know if you've been looking at your chart, but going back to there's a few major transits. I mean, we covered a lot so far, but on the 15th, that's like a day to circle, and that's like within one day for
I know.
you might actually, because of the way solar returns work, you might even have your solar return on the 15th, but we have a full moon in Gemini. And on that same day, the 15th, Mercury stations direct. So on the 15th, or the days around the 15th, I'm kind of assuming that that's when some like information gets shook loose or a story gets messed with somehow. I'm looking forward to that day. I think that's going to be it looks like just a big information bomb or something, or like big messages coming through, whether you're thinking, oh, okay, news in the world, or just even messages coming up from your own body, your own subconscious. Like that looks like a big epiphany day.
Yeah.
And happy
And I
birthday.
thank you. And I actually, I know I had mentioned possibly going to New York for my birthday. Nah, I'm gonna go to New Orleans. I'm gonna go right to that place that almost killed me a couple times, where stories live in a maelstrom across time and space. But I want to honor it, because if it wasn't for that, then I wouldn't have this. If I didn't go through what I went through, and in this beautiful chthonic, plutonic city where stories just overlap and intertwine, uh, yeah, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have this. And I'm just going to honor that, sitting on the banks of the Mississippi down there. And I know I've seen that full moon right before my birthday. I'm like, ooh, maybe I'll, kind of jump in the river and like rebirth myself. I don't know who knows what I'll do, but I'm going to be I'm going to be in a state. I guarantee that.
Well, no, good choice. I would choose New Orleans over the Northeast in December.
Yeah.
But finally, I just want to like there is kind of a cap in December, literally a cap, to all this Sagittarian Gemini stuff. On the 21st, the sun enters Capricorn, winter solstice. I think that third week of December, things are going to not feel anyway as like movable. We're dealing with Saturn's in Pisces right now, but Capricorn is going to bring it down a notch. So if you were just thinking about like, oh my God, that sounds too crazy for me. Like, how long is this? I think things will shift a little bit when the sun enters Capricorn. And
And that's the beautiful design, right? That balance,
yeah,
the grounding.
yeah, like we can like that's what I love about astrology is
Yeah.
you're studying cycles of time and you're learning the process of change, you're learning the process of letting go and allowing something new to happen, and hopefully participating or at least witnessing that life cycle of
Yeah.
either any living thing or even like any
Yeah.
experience, or any even idea. Everything has that life cycle, and it can be a second or it could be 1,000 years, but
Yeah.
everything
I love that.
participates.
Yeah.
I want to leave you with something I read recently, that speaks to some things that I think are going to come up. And I found this in Lit Hub,
Oh,
and
cool.
it's about, why we should be reading Philip K. Dick now.
Whose
And
birthday was my birthday? We shared December 16th as a
oh,
birthday.
really?
True
Oh,
story.
really? That's even more perfect. Um, so I just want to give you like more of a flavor. Like Anastasia gave us a lot of flavor. This is just a little like cherry on top.
Mm.
And yeah, I'll just read it. Beside most aspects that define our modernity, AI, social media, increasingly sophisticated propaganda, can be heard the voice of Philip K. Dick exclaiming with both amusement and concern, "I told you so," lauded by the critic and theorist Frederick Jameson as, quote, "the Shakespeare of science fiction," end quote.
Mm.
Dick now stands as the best known science fiction writer of the 20th century. How to Build a Universe That Doesn't Fall Apart 2 Days Later, published in 1978, but begun around the time of Richard Nixon's resignation, has achieved cult status for its exploration of manufactured realities and institutional power. In the book, Dick examines how media systems can create, quote, pseudo worlds, unquote,
Mm.
delivered directly into people's minds. His analysis of how, quote, spurious realities are manufactured by the media, by governments, by big corporations, by religious groups, political groups, unquote, strikes an eerily familiar chord in our hyper digital age. And then they go on to quote a passage of this essay that I think just really falls in line with the astrology of right now. And here we go. The basic tool for manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use the words. George Orwell made this clear in his novel 1984. But another way to control the minds of people is to control their perceptions. If you can get them to see the world as you do, they will think as you do. Comprehension follows perception. How do you get them to see the reality you see? After all, it is only one reality of many. Images are our basic constituent. Pictures. This is why the power of TV to influence young minds is so staggeringly vast. Words and pictures are synchronized. The possibility of total control of the viewer exists, especially the young viewer. TV viewing is a kind of sleep learning. An EEG of a person watching TV shows that after about half an hour, the brain decides that nothing is happening and it goes into a hypnoidal twilight state, emitting alpha waves. This is because there is such little eye motion. In addition, much of the information is graphic and therefore passes into the right hemisphere of the brain, rather than being processed by the left, where the conscious personality is located. Recent experiments indicate that much of what we see on the TV screen is received on a subliminal basis. We only imagine that we consciously see what is there. The bulk of the messages elude our attention. Literally, after a few hours of TV watching, we do not know what we have seen. Our memories are spurious, like our memories of dreams. The blanks are filled in retrospectively and falsified. We have participated unknowingly in the creation of spurious reality, and then we have obligingly fed it to ourselves. We have colluded in our own doom. And I want to, he, not to like keep going on, but there's something in that when our perception and the information that we're getting is not like quite perfect, it is us. We fill in the gaps. We project our own stuff onto this imperfect landscape of information and meaning, and then we take it as reality when we're really kind of being thrown back on ourselves. It's really not the total invitation of something new. It's some other hybrid of some things that got in, and then where we weren't able to piece all the puzzles together, we fill it in. And we're really just kind of interacting with ourselves. But there's also a great power in that.
In that feedback loop. Yeah. If you know that, yeah. And then when you know that, then you can get free from your own matrix.
Exactly. And I really want to leave people with that.
Yeah.
As we head into this week where there's going to be a lot of imperfect, incomplete, possibly wrong, possibly true information and puzzle pieces that don't fit, that we are inserting ourselves into it and making it make whatever sense. But to like this whole next 6 weeks, anything that comes in, the expression, take it with a grain of salt, like take the whole damn salt shaker. Like,
yeah,
don't believe everything that you think. Don't believe everything that you feel. Just kind of be with it. Like,
yeah. And the invitation is to just play this in the background. Let these words heal you. Let this energy reach you, and let this continually reach you on a subconscious level in those places and cracks where maybe you don't get it now. And then 3 months down, you're like, holy shit. Actually, I think I heard that on a podcast someday. And that really clicks with me now. Let these words continue to support you in that journey.
So we've been on here for 2 hours.
We got to get off.
That's like a good ending.
Yes, perfect, son. So good.
Thank you so much, Anastasia.
You're so welcome.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
So all of Anastasia's information is going to be in the show notes. You're going to send me any special links, right, that you want there. My books are open. It's busy season, but like I'm here for the conversations. And yeah, take care, everybody. Remember, whole salt shaker of everything that's coming in. And I'll see you next time.
Hold your heart, blow your mind. Bye, Corey. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks.